I gotta be honest, I was hoping, but not expecting, to have such a newsy Monday here in mid-February. We kinda got a lot going on right now around your Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and everything else here on today's show. I'm Joshua Brisco, joined as always by Tucker Franklin on the other side of the proverbial glass. He'll hop in a little while. But I thought we were going to do some big picture off-season talk for the Chiefs today. Well, that's been sprinkled in throughout 2 months of shows at this point. But then something specific happened. There was a story over on ESPN that I thought would be worth a little bit of a conversation here today. Not breaking news so much as an opinion worth taking a closer look at. And then we got actual news a little bit earlier today when the Miami Dolphins released Tyreek Hill. We'll go through a number of the twists and turns and the potential paths the Chiefs could take here over these next couple of weeks. But I will just mention the newsy thing here at the top. The Dolphins released Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb today. They're in a full rebuild, a full reboot. They're moving money, freeing up what they can, all of that. Before we get into the crux of today's show, the blockbuster trade that could be on the Chiefs' radar here, and a couple moves that I think they could make to acquire players that are worth discussing, let's go ahead and hit the Dolphin-adjacent topics at the beginning. If the comment section on today's show is any indication, that's where a lot of the energy is right now. I will say, first, I'd check on Bradley Chubb. I'd check on any of these veteran defensive linemen who might have a role. You just make the call, you bring them in, you do the medicals, you have the visit, you get a feel for the market. And this isn't super specific to Bradley Chubb, but if you are an available NFL defensive lineman, the Kansas City Chiefs should talk to you this offseason. Just figure out what your options are. They don't need to sign 10 edges, but they do need to add a couple who matter. And so figuring out what that market is, I think having a guy who's kind of in that veteran space that maybe doesn't have a whole lot left in the tank, but would be a worthy guy to have in the rotation, that makes a lot of sense. So call Bradley Chubb. If somebody wants to pay him twice what the Chiefs want to pay him, then you let him go. It's not the end of the world. But I've seen that question pop up a bunch. Definitely worth a check-in. And then there's Tyreek Hill. There were questions, obviously, from the moment that he was injured in Miami last season. There was the idea of, well, could the Chiefs be the team to reunite with him? What would the trade mechanisms look like? Where would the salary leave them? What would it cost? Frankly, none of that really moved me. If you got to a spot where the Dolphins would have paid like all of the money that they're paying now after cutting him, and you wanted to talk about some, conditional, very, very end of the deal kind of picks or whatever, fine. But being a free agent, I've got a pretty clear pro and a pretty clear con argument on Tyreek Hill. And it will leave out some of the obvious ones for what that's worth. Tyreek Hill is a speed and quickness and change of direction explosive wide receiver who turns 32 years old in 2 weeks, and the last time we saw him on a football field, he was being carted off of it with a very serious knee injury. I do not know what kind of football player Tyreek Hill will be in 2026. And he might be the best wide receiver in St. Joe if he arrives there instantly. It's totally plausible. It's also totally plausible that he never looks like himself again. Those are the two sides of an aging receiver with the style that he plays, with his skill set, with that injury. You just don't know. And look, there are a couple of things that have come through the comments on the off-the-field front. That's been a story for Tyreek Hill his entire time in the league, before he came into the league, and it's a story of Rashee Rice's entire time in the league and before entering the league. it is a very reasonable question to ask if you're a Chiefs fan. Say, hey, can this team build its wide receiver room around Tyreek Hill and Rashee Rice with the availability and just kind of stability concerns that both of them offer? I don't know. I love Eric Bieniemy and the accountability and all that. I don't know if Eric Bieniemy wants that to be the way that the offense starts to retool. I don't know if Chad O'Shea would be thrilled to have an extra Hall of Fame talent in his room, or if it's just time to move on to the next thing. Here's what I'll say. I think a free agent reunion with Tyreek Hill, if it is like a very minimally guaranteed, I'm going to show up and prove to the world that I've still got this. I'm going to come back with my favorite quarterback I've ever played with. I'm going to come back with a 36 going on 37-year-old Travis Kelce. I can see Tyreek Hill wanting to be here, and if he wants to be here bad enough that it is a cost-effective move for the Chiefs to make, I think it makes some sense. I also do not think that your plan for revitalizing and rejuvenating the offense can be a 32-year-old post-injury Tyreek Hill and a 36, almost 37 in October, year-old Travis Kelce. That cannot be your solution. Maybe it can be some patchwork pieces here and there. It's got a little bit of that run-it-back feeling that when it didn't work out on the initial run-it-back campaign the Chiefs made, I think you've seen the Chiefs pay a little bit of a price here for not nailing the refresh and nailing the band they did have together. It gives you 2 rings in a row. It sends you to 3 games in a row, 3 Super Bowls in a row. You get all of that success. It's very hard to say goodbye. I don't think that bringing those guys back is building your future the way you want it to. Could Tyreek Hill help bridge that gap a little bit? Maybe. That's where I'm at now. That's where I'm at. I'm not going to talk about Rashee Rice's strawberries. Just, you can Google it if you want. I'm not talking about Rashee Rice's Valentine's Day. I'm not going to do it. I see the comments. I saw the Instagram story. I'm not going to talk about it. So I'm conflicted on Tyreek Hill, and I'll tell you what, man, if you came to today's show hoping for some clear-cut, easy opinions that you can just take and repeat from me today, I'm not going to give them to you, because I'm really conflicted on Tyreek Hill, and I'm really conflicted about this topic of the day. And a trade that we've talked about plenty already. We're going to continue to talk about through the combine. We'll start to hear some more murmurings on this. But the Chiefs could make a massive trade to kick off their offseason, and I don't know if I want them to or not. Look, I know I told you on Friday, right? We talked about the terrible mock draft, and sometimes you know more than the analysts that are 30,000 feet above the whole picture looking down at the Chiefs. Well, I can tell you when I see bad work or bad takes, at least. I'll also tell you that I like when Bill Barnwell takes a look at the league the way that he does. He's with ESPN now. Has been for a while. That's not new, but he wasn't always. I like the way that Bill Barnwell thinks about football. I like the way that he thinks about roster construction, and he's responsible about trying to project things that could reasonably happen. So when I saw this morning that Bill Barnwell had a whole list of logical trade proposals over on ESPN today, I clicked it to think, really, I wonder if any of these are things that I might be able to talk about today, where maybe the Chiefs step in instead of the Bills, for example, in one of these trades that he proposes. I am going to still talk about all of these other moves, and maybe we'll even see, I might, depending on how long I talk about, spoiler alert here, Trent McDuffie. Depending on how long I talk about McDuffie, I might just make Tucker give me thumbs up, thumbs down on some of these other deals that maybe the Chiefs should be sniffing around, not the ones that Barnwell proposed, though. The trade proposal that Barnwell offers for the Chiefs is exactly the deal, with one small difference, almost exactly the deal that we've kicked around as a potential move for them to use to kick off their offseason. Barnwell's trade is that the Los Angeles Rams get Trent McDuffie and a 5th-round pick from the Chiefs, and that the Chiefs get the number 29 overall pick in this year's draft. It's exactly the trade that makes logical sense. The Rams have 2 firsts because they have their own, and Atlanta's at number 13 overall. As Barnwell notes, Matt Stafford's clock is ticking. He's coming back at least next year. How much longer? How open is that Rams Super Bowl window? We don't know. And Barnwell says the Rams' biggest weakness, it's at corner. What has Les Snead done as general manager of the Rams? He has tried this before with Marcus Peters, which, by the way, to answer a question that I get a lot in the chat that I saw earlier, which was, whose cleat is that? It's a Marcus Peters cleat. Shows where my allegiances lie. I've always loved Marcus Peters, and I will never be able to stop, nor will I try. And I will also tell you a true thing about Marcus Peters in a minute. There's still the cleat is here, one way or the other. Also, Jimmy said, hi from Denmark. That rules. Hi, Jimmy. Hi from Denmark. Well, hi from Kansas City. To you in Denmark. Be crazy if I was doing this show from Denmark right now. The whole time I've been doing this from Denmark, and nobody knew. Fantastic. So, the Rams have done this. It worked better with Ramsey than it did for Marcus Peters. And here's what Barnwell writes. I will do a little bit of Josh Reads the Internet for the longtime fans of the most successful segment in sports radio history, Josh Reads the Internet. Here's Bill Barnwell's take on the trade for Trent McDuffie for the Rams' own first-round pick of 29 overall. Quote, McDuffie fits that bill as a feisty, aggressive cornerback with the ability to play near the line of scrimmage. The Rams have spent at one of the league's lowest rates over the past 2 years on defense, and they would have no trouble absorbing a potential extension for McDuffie, let alone his $13.6 million fifth-year option in 2026. McDuffie might be best in the slot, where the Rams use Quentin Lake, but he's plenty effective as an outside cornerback, too. Why would the Chiefs, who also expect to compete for a Super Bowl, trade McDuffie? Well, Brett Veach hasn't been too interested in paying cornerbacks during his time as general manager. The Chiefs traded Peters after 3 seasons, 1 year removed from a first-team All-Pro nod. They developed L'Jarius Sneed into a standout, but at the end of his rookie deal, they franchise-tagged him and traded him to the Titans for a 3rd-round pick. Pause here, quick timeout. I will note, there are other factors to the Peters and Sneed trades. Let's say vibes and health, respectively, just to keep it smooth. So and obviously neither of those are like concerns with McDuffie. He's been quite healthy, and it seems like he's just a prince of a guy in the locker room. Defense loves him, Spags loves him, everybody loves Trent McDuffie. So it's not all of this logic can just be, Brett Veach doesn't pay corners, he's not going to pay McDuffie, he doesn't pay corners ever. Not necessarily, but he hasn't paid a top-level corner. So chicken, egg, dinosaur, wherever that mutation comes from, I don't know if we're going to see him break that trend, but he hasn't broken it yet. How does Jalen Watson fit into all of this? Are you going to pay Jalen Watson at a 1 rung below top-level cornerback price? And if you do that, does that count as really spending at corner? Is Christian Fulton kind of the biggest cornerback swing they've taken so far? Does that make him more or less gun-shy about their ability to just find and replace? I digress. Back to Barnwell. McDuffie is better than Peters or Sneed, but if the Chiefs aren't planning on extending their top corner, getting something significant from him now makes more sense than losing him in free agency for nothing more than a 2028 compensatory pick. In acquiring the number 29 selection, the Chiefs would have 3 of the top 40 picks in this year's draft, which would give them the ability to add multiple rookie contributors and or move around for specific players. I'll add parenthetically again here, 29 in the first round would also give you another 5th-year option to pick up on that player if things work out. So that's more valuable than 33, not just because it's a few picks higher, but also a little more control there. Back to Barnwell. I'd rather see the Chiefs give an extension to one of their best players, but until Veach pays a cornerback top-tier money, I'm not counting on that to occur. The Chiefs have spent just $112.2 million in cash at cornerback since the start of 2018, the 3rd lowest total for any team over that span. Isn't that wild? And it's scary to think about trading a sure thing for nothing more than draft capital, but remember that the Chiefs initially landed McDuffie by moving up with some of the picks they got from Miami in the Tyreek Hill trade. There are levels to this that are tough for me, and there are levels to it that make a ton of sense. With 3 picks in the top 40, the Chiefs would theoretically be able to take one of the top 2 defensive linemen at 9. I will probably dig more into this in the next couple of weeks, but like Matt Miller in his mock draft on ESPN, he has 6 wide receivers going in his first round, 7 receivers going before the Chiefs pick at 40. But when they pick at 40, it feels basically, there's a tier breakdown essentially. Tate, Tyson, Lemon all go at 5, 14, 16 respectively. Then Boston, Concepcion, Fields, and Bernard, those guys all go between 24 and 34. There are a couple of receivers available at 40 who go shortly after. Point being, it feels like there's a tier break after Tate, Tyson, Lemon, and you could get one of them at 9 if you want one of those at 9, or you might be able to get one of those guys in your next tier. The lab guys talked about kind of, picking your flavor, so to speak, in terms of the type of wide receiver you might want who's not one of those top 3, and you find the guy that fits what you want to do offensively. Even if it goes exactly like Matt Miller's mock does, Malachi Fields and Jeremy Bernard are guys who are accessible to you at 28 that aren't there at 40. There were a couple others. I've written so many notes today, and I've moved so many things around that I've now lost where I put my other little nugget of where draft picks end up. Maybe I need to refresh the Google Doc. Maybe I closed one Google Doc too early. Doesn't really matter. The point being, and not that any of these mocks are gospel, but one like the Ringer mock draft has Jeremiah Love falling to I think the Texans at 28. I think it was Field Yates's mock has Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon, going like 30. The reason I wanted to mention those names, I think it's way more likely that Love goes top 10 than he goes at the end of the first round. But I wanted to mention a couple of those names, and specifically that pocket of receivers, because again, those are the guys who would be in the mix for you at 29 overall. Might not be there for you at 40, and then at 40, you can just pick the next position that you have not yet addressed there. 29 overall is a legitimate weapon in the draft. I would like to believe that you're going to get equal production from a guy there that will be able to offset with the value the type of production you need to justify the first round pick, the contract you give, and you reset the timeline that way. But I talked about this right after the Super Bowl. I have a hard time, we talked about this on Weird Games last week too, I have a hard time feeling better about the Chiefs' defense in an offseason when they trade away one of their 2 best defenders. That's a really difficult piece of math. And I do still think it makes enough sense to have a nice, long conversation about. If you move Trent McDuffie, but it gives you a legitimate asset in the passing game, maybe it's your tight end, maybe it's your favorite of those remaining receivers. If you're able to get Ruben Bain at 9, a receiver at 29, and the best player available at 40, that if you hit those 3 picks, it's worth it. If you whiff, you've given the number 21 overall pick a few years ago away for a 29th pick who, as Scott mentioned there a minute ago, hey, one of those draft picks could be anything. Maybe even a Trent McDuffie. Maybe even a boat. I'm really conflicted about that because I would have gotten the Trent McDuffie deal done already. it would have been a higher priority for me, or at least I think I would have. I always have to say that there is a chance that the Chiefs really pushed to extend Trent McDuffie over these last couple of years, and McDuffie just wasn't ready to sign the deal. He would rather bet on himself, bet on the cornerback market, hit free agency, or at least get close to free agency, and then get an extra $5, $6, $7 million a year. That's totally possible. But I would have gotten the McDuffie deal done certainly before Nick Bolton, probably before George Karlaftis or Trey Smith. Just if I'm prioritizing those guys and what I'd want to pay them. Either the Chiefs tried and couldn't get it done, and now the price has gone up, or they didn't try and they should have. But regardless, where you're at now, you just kind of run out of options. The Rams aren't giving you 29 overall for George Karlaftis on this contract. And the math doesn't work because the deal's done and all of that. But as like the thought exercise here, McDuffie is the movable one. And the Chiefs planned with that in mind. I'm quite certain of that. They didn't get to this offseason and go, oh man, did we forget to extend Trent McDuffie? They've made these strategic investments. And again, like I'm kind of lukewarm on the Karlaftis deal, but I think it's probably going to age pretty well as long as he ages pretty well. It's a reasonable deal for a reasonable player. But I would have liked to pay Trent McDuffie like he's one of the best defensive backs in the sport. I don't think we know. I'm seeing some. I really does bug me when we get unnecessarily definitive in the comments. We don't know that McDuffie didn't want to do the deal, and we don't know what the Chiefs offered. I think we did hear something like, yeah, there was like a conversation about it. If the Chiefs said, hey, we'll give you $18 million a year, and McDuffie said, no, thank you. That's not on McDuffie, right? Like that's why there's always a push and pull to this. Maybe we'll find out if McDuffie signs elsewhere or is traded. Maybe we'll find out. They offered me $22 million a year, and I wanted 26, and they wouldn't do it. So now I'm making 31, 32, wherever he ends up being. It would be a trade that hurts, but it would also be a legitimate, huge step in trying to reset that timeline to keep Patrick Mahomes surrounded by talent. That again, if you think about it, if you go. Certainly, if you're on Team Jeremiah Love at 9, think about it this way. And I know where Tucker stands on Jeremiah Love, so maybe this will, I don't know if it'll rattle the cage or if this is a picture that you're happy with, Tucker. And we'll take our break after this, and I'll let Tucker speak for himself. If you like Jeremiah Love at number 9, you're probably on Team Trade Trent McDuffie, because at least you can get a defensive lineman at 29. And he won't be the guy you'd have at 9, but you can get yourself a first-round defensive lineman, take your pick, you can have the 5th-year option on there, and you've at least made that investment into your D-line group, and then you're going receiver at 40, or I guess vice versa. But it's hard for me personally right now, it's hard for me to imagine the Chiefs not getting a receiver and a defensive lineman with their first 2 picks. And again, see the question here from Chase. The trade proposed by Barnwell is McDuffie and a 5th for the number 29 overall pick from the Rams. I've thrown around that Rams pick as kind of my guess at a realistic, reasonable cost. If the Rams are offering you their own second, I don't think I'm willing to do that, even for like a year of Trent McDuffie on his 5th-year option. You can do this dance again on the salary cap, or on the franchise tag, and deal with the implications of that next year. I also have seen a couple of things about Leo Chenal. Curious about Leo Chenal with something Matt Verderame said on that football show. He was a little skeptical of the idea that Chenal's going to get like a starting linebacker contract to be like a guy somewhere. I kind of hope that's true, because I'd like to have him back in a very similar role to what he's played with. I just think he's so easy to fall in love with that somebody's going to pay him, but I don't know. There's the option on the McDuffie trade. I will. The comment sections really brought some Monday heat today that I cannot say I was expecting. Some good, some not so good. We'll talk about it when we come back. Joined now by the one, the only, the glowing Tucker D. Franklin, and the D stands for vitamin D, which is what he's getting through these eye patches right now. It's a good look, Tucker. It's both glamorous. It's kind of Taylor Swift and kind of Bryce Harper. You know what I mean? Like you're walking a good line here today.
Yeah,
you look glamorous.
I thank you. Yeah, I thought Tara had these laying around and it said an energy drink for your eyes, and I thought I like this.
I like this,
and I like my eyes, so. We're revitalizing ourselves on this Monday, and boy, howdy, has the chat been revitalized on this Monday as well, because we are getting some lots of feisty conversations, fiery conversations going on in the chat. Appreciate everybody joining us here and having some conversations. But man, oh man, who would have thought Monday, February 16th would be the day that everyone would have hard and fast opinions about how the Chiefs offseason should go?
It's kind of buck wild. Maybe everybody just had a real good Valentine's Day weekend. You know, maybe maybe everybody's just energized and going now, and maybe everybody handled their business this week. I don't know.
Like Rasheed did, yeah.
Well, listen, we can't all have that. We can't all get that on a mug, you know? I do want to ask you if you feel like as KCSN's, I think, foremost Jeremiah Love, you know, you're just a lover through and through. You love love.
Lover, not a fighter.
I think as you establish yourself as KCSN's biggest lover, do you sign off on what I just threw out there, that like if you want Jeremiah Love at 9, you almost have to want to trade Trent McDuffie, so you do get two real swings at edge and wide receiver. In this case, would be 29 and 40.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that you have to. Like when I look at this and how this offseason is going to shape up, this might not be a very popular opinion, but man, I think that this is a multi-year rebuild. I don't think you can I don't think you fix everything in one swing. Matt Verder and I power ranked the biggest needs for the Chiefs on that football show. So we gave our top fives. Our top three were similar-ish, I guess. 4 and 5 where we kind of both differed a little bit, but we both kind of got to the same spot of where we thought. That's called a tease, folks. That's how they tease you.
It's a good pod. Let's do it this morning.
So wow, already. Wow,
already did.
That's nice. For some reason my video looked like it was shot through a potato, so I appreciate everyone sticking through that if you watch that version of it. But it doesn't look bad.
You're supposed to put
now,
the eye
right?
masks under your eyes, not over your camera lens. Oh. That was But your camera looks rejuvenated now, so it's like an energy drink for your webcam.
That's good. That's what they needed. Thank you, Mizzou19, for saying I look glowing. That's really what I needed today. But I think when you look at this, wide receiver is not necessarily right now a pressing need. But when you look at the depth chart, you're like, oh, you've got 3 guys that are like for sure on the roster for this year. Like, you're going to need some bodies. Will they probably re-sign Juju? Unfortunately. And that's nothing against Juju. Like, I want that to be clear. I think Juju has done everything that has been asked of him on every team he's been on, and he's a phenomenal teammate. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is a phenomenal human being from everything that I understand about him, from everything I've heard about him. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a great teammate. Everyone loves him, but they don't need to be trotting Juju Smith-Schuster out there. This is like the Kareem Hunt situation, right? Like, Kareem Hunt, I don't think that he needed to be out there, and that's not his fault. That's not Kareem Hunt's fault that he was out there shouldering the load for most of the season.
You don't want your team to need to rely on Juju Smith-Schuster and Kareem Hunt in 2025, 26, etc. Yeah.
If Juju Smith-Schuster is playing like a Marcus Kemp role, and like, remember when Marcus Kemp was getting out there every now and again and actually ended up having to make a pretty big catch in, what was it, the 2022, I guess, technically? 23?
I would have gone on the earlier one, but I could not tell you for sure. All these playoff runs just run together, you know.
They really do, and especially because they run into the next year too. Then it like kind of messes with your brain a little bit.
It really does. For so long as a Chiefs fan, I never had to worry about that problem.
right, and now we have to try to sort all that stuff out. I do think that, you know, going back to your question about needing to trade McDuffie for it, I don't necessarily think that you need to. Would it be nice to have an extra swing at a first-round pick? Absolutely. I think that would be great. But I think that you can get Mesidor at pick 40. I think you can get a wide receiver if you, again, now, I mean, if you go running back, wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, you're going to have a conversation. You better have signed Boye Mafe, Kwity Paye, and Bradley Chubb at that point.
Give Spags a raise.
Yeah, I mean, holy cow. But if you, I think there's plenty of wide receivers also at pick 40 as well. When you start to look at wide receiver classes, I think now until the end of time, they're always going to be deep. We've had this conversation a few times. The Lab talked about it on the draft show. This will be coming out later this week as well. We got all kinds of stuff for you guys draft-wise, but I don't necessarily think it's a need. Would it be nice? Absolutely. To have 2 swings at the first round, to have 2 guys on a 5th year that you can just tack on at the end of it, that would be cool. But I don't know. I waffle back and forth between the trading Trent McDuffie thing. Maybe they get it done. Maybe they do it just because they can get the extra capital and they can, pay Jalen Watson and they can feel a little bit better about that in that regard because they feel good about how they can develop their corners rather than paying Trent McDuffie a high dollar amount. What is this high dollar amount? I don't know what it's going to be. That's going to be interesting. There's a whole lot of factors that play into the trade. But if they really want to, rebuild, I mean, you're hitting a pretty big reset button on that defense by trading away one of the cornerstone pieces. And then you have the most tenured player is going to be 33? 30. How old is Chris Jones?
I think he'll be going on 30. I think he's 31 right now. I think he'll be going on 32.
Okay, going on 32. Okay. That makes a little bit more sense.
Yep, he's 31. He turned 32 in July. So it'll be his age 32 season.
Wow, very close to my birthday, July 3rd. Mine's July 1st.
You guys party together on the 2nd.
Shout out to my guy. So I think the defense does need, we talked about this a lot just as the season went along, is the offense had problems that we didn't think were personnel, right? Mm-hmm. The defense had problems that we knew were personnel.
Right.
And they kind of had the inverse problems. So again, they've got a lot of free agents. Like Hollywood Brown's a free agent. Juju Smith-Schuster's a free agent. I don't know if you want to entertain re-signing either of those guys at the wide receiver level. You still have Rashee Rice. You still have Xavier Worthy. Jalen Royals does exist, contrary to popular belief. He is technically a wide receiver. Nico Remigio, I think, is an exclusive rights free agent. So they don't have a lot of bodies. That's the other problem when it comes to the wide receiver room. And they kind of do have bodies in the corner room. Now, are they good bodies? That's up for
You think they're probably capable. Like, the floor is higher. The floor is higher because you think Dave Merritt and Steve Spagnuolo set the floor with their own human bodies. Just like, no, I will puppet you from the sideline if necessary. Look, like, the running back room, I know this is going to sound stupid. I know this is going to sound dumb. The running back room doesn't have a Christian Fulton, much less a Noel Williams, right? Like, Brashard Smith, same draft class, not expecting the same jump in workload. The reason that I keep getting hung up on the McDuffie running back connection is that the Chiefs' 3rd pick right now is scheduled to be at 74 overall.
Correct.
If you do, and I know you've already, the double offense thing is a very fair critique, but if you go Love at 9, receiver at 40, now the first rookie defensive end you add will be drafted later than you drafted Ashton Gelati, because he went 66. Omar Norman Lott went 63. And so if you said, hey, instead now you're going, and like I'm still at a point now where I don't think it can be Love at 9 for me, because I am deeply concerned about both the short-term and long-term health of the defensive line and the wide receiver room. But if you said, hey, it's going to be Love at 9, but it's going to be a receiver at 29 and the best available D lineman at 40. So you know what? That's you've at least you've addressed your 3 biggest needs at the beginning of the draft that way. But we are going to have 2 months to continue this conversation. So can I throw some hypothetical trades at you?
Yes.
I'm gonna have you give us some thumbs up, thumbs down kind of things here. These are all also from Bill Barnwell's story
Bill.
here. And say again.
Shout out Bill.
Shout out to Bill, carrying us today. Big Bill, I call him. And he's an executive producer of this episode of the show today because he did all of this work, and we're just
he doesn't know
about it.
Yeah.
He doesn't know. Didn't ask for it. I think he'd appreciate the credit.
I think he would. Yeah,
he seems like he's got a sense of humor about him.
Yeah.
So here's what the true Hall of Fame Double B says, because the other guy doesn't deserve it. Bill Barnwell does. Bill Belichick, not in my house, not in my canon. Here are a few interesting deals that I'd kick around. Now, usually when we do this, the Chiefs are picking later than all of the other teams, and you go, well, you'd have to up it by a level. In this case, mostly not true. The Chiefs are picking 9, and that rotates a little bit as the draft rounds go on.
9, 10, and 11.
But here are a few that stood out.
9, 10, and 11 in the order, like, is how kind of it would go. Or it'd be 8, 9, 10, I think, is kind of how they're going to
I think it's like the cup game where you have to figure out where the ball is, and then if you get it right, you get to pick 8th in that round. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I've got 4 of these that I want to... 5 of these that I want to actually talk about that are not McDuffie related. The Chiefs are not exclusive. They're not explicitly mentioned in any of these.
Good.
Starting on the offensive side. Barnwell has the Buffalo Bills getting Brian Thomas Jr. and a 5th-round pick for Keon Coleman and a first, number 26 overall. So the Bills are getting Keon Coleman out of here. They're basically giving... It's basically a first-round pick for Brian Thomas Jr. and a 5th and Coleman offsetting there. I think the Chiefs' offer could just be 40 overall for BTJ, or and maybe adding a 5th to the mix. Or I'm just thinking about the receiver swap. I just wonder what you would think about Xavier Worthy or Rashee Rice being a part of a deal for Brian Thomas Jr. I like the BTJ kind of change of scenery for a player who has still been successful, just didn't have quite the year 2 that the Jags wanted him to have. Any interest in Brian Thomas Jr. for, let's call it 40 overall, and then whatever else it takes to make the math work?
No, I would certainly be interested in it. I'm trying to think why the Jags would take that deal. is what I would, the biggest hurdle for me is.
Yep.
You look at right now what the Jags have. Obviously, they have Travis Hunter, but they came out and announced that Travis Hunter is basically going to be a cornerback and sometimes playing wide receiver.
Yes.
Which, I mean, he missed the majority of the season this year with an injury, so how much does that have to do with anything? I don't know.
And then Jacoby Myers was like a huge ad for them, but
yes.
I would also rather have him and Brian Thomas Jr. if I was the Jags. So I'm with you on that. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to lead with that one, because I don't...
Sure.
I'm guessing that Brian Thomas Jr. is a Jag next year would be where I'd put my money right now.
Yeah, it would make sense. Yeah.
How about this one? This one has a real reason the Chiefs wouldn't do it.
Okay.
But he suggests that the Carolina Panthers get Michael Pittman Jr. and a 7th for Xavier Legette and a 5th. Now, the reason behind this, it's the last year of Pittman's deal. You and Verderam talked about how the Colts are kind of looking at like, hey, Alec Pierce or Michael Pittman at this point. The problem with the Chiefs in this space would be that it's hard to imagine the Chiefs trading for Pittman and then instantly extending him after spending no time in the offense.
Correct.
You almost have to do that unless it's just, hey, we're flipping a coin with Xavier Legette in a couple little pick swaps. I think that makes sense for the Panthers. I don't know that the Chiefs would really have the ability to pull that one off.
Yeah, Michael Pittman has always been one of those guys that's been like a what if the Chiefs got this guy in their offense. And, you know, Michael Pittman's been pretty good, but I think his numbers have certainly declined as of last season. Pierce has been a lot more reliable for the Colts. They probably want to invest more capital into that as they're trying to figure out this whole quarterback thing there and have some familiarity with the system. Not that Michael Pittman doesn't, but to be able to get out from underneath that number that they have Pittman at to then be able to basically put a wide receiver at a similar number seems to be the math for that. Now, getting Xavier Legette in return, I don't know how much that really does for the Colts. Like, I don't know if that really like moves a needle in any regard, but
it's better than cutting him. Yeah, I think that's the idea.
Yeah,
it's better,
yeah.
less painful than just cutting your guy outright. But I think that's very fair. Here's one that when I saw it, I went, well, this is something they should be in the mix of. Details here. I'm saving the best 2 for last, just to be clear.
Okay.
Bengals get defensive tackle Kenny Clark for a future late-round pick swap from the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, Kenny Clark, isn't he the guy they basically traded Micah Parsons for straight up? That's an exaggeration, but it kind of feels that way. Here's what Barnwell writes. It says, Clark is set to make $21.5 million, $11 million of which comes due in mid-March, in a mid-March roster bonus. He projects to have the 5th largest cap hit of any Cowboys player. The problem is that the 4th largest cap hit belongs to fellow defensive tackle Quinnen Williams. I think somebody ought to make that move for Kenny Clark. the Bengals makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, it's relatively similar to where the Chiefs are at with Chris Jones. He's got the second biggest cap hit on the team right now. The player and trade price makes sense. That's a good amount of draft capital, virtually nothing for a good starting caliber defensive tackle. I don't think the Chiefs can probably finagle the salary to make that make sense, though.
That's what they're going to be up against with a lot of these moves is the salary. And even if they do all the restructures and make all the cuts that we anticipate them to make, it's still pretty tight with a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
So here's the wide receiver one I want to at least think about, because we talked about this. We talked about this early on. I wasn't sure if it was going to add up or not, but Barnwell's stamp here means something to me. The Denver Broncos give up Riley Moss, a second and a future 5th round pick for a 5th round pick and A.J. Brown.
Oh.
The most interesting part of this is that Barnwell does measure the dead cap hit and all the things that we talked about like a month ago, and acknowledges, I think he says that he thinks there's still a very good chance that A.J. Brown is still in Philly next year, but even with a massive dead cap hit, and even with the Eagles having some like retirement rumors around there and everything, like they could be in a tough salary spot in 2026, and you know, the implications of however much longer they have to dig out of that. But I thought it was fascinating that Barnwell does think that trade is possible, even with those numbers. The bad money ends up on the Eagles side, not on the receiving team side. Trent McDuffie is a better player than Riley Moss. If they're looking for a corner in Philadelphia, that is one way to get there. And then also just draft capital is another. I don't think it's going to happen, but I just think we got to keep the eye on A.J. Brown. I think there was at least a rumor, maybe even a report, that the Chiefs were sniffing around A.J. Brown back when they traded away Tyreek Hill. Like that is an interest that has seemed to be in place before. I know I haven't looked yet. I'm sure there are about to be 15 comments about how much of a head case A.J. Brown is while we're all talking about Rashee Rice and Tyreek Hill. I think you are not going to get an alpha number 1 wide receiver for less than a premium if things are going well. So I think you would, in this case, if it's the Chiefs or the Broncos, you would be gambling on being able to limit the headache, relieve some of the pressure from A.J. Brown's cranium, and get into the mix again. I'll tell you this, if the Broncos made that trade, I, a Chiefs fan, would be pretty bummed, because I think that would make the Broncos offense significantly better. So that's my favorite of the offensive moves. Should we be talking about A.J. Brown at all?
Probably not, but it is a lot more fun to talk about A.J. Brown. I will say, though, to give you a bright side on if the Broncos did do that move, the bright side is Bo Nix is still their quarterback. So
yeah, it's good.
It's
nice.
That would be the silver lining there. It's not like they would trade for a good quarterback, and at that point, I think we're okay as Chiefs fans. But yeah, A.J. Brown would be even more actual upset, I think, if he was in Denver. I think he'd be more upset if he was in Denver because he wouldn't be getting the football.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. They might not be the landing spot to keep that from happening again.
Yeah,
but he would make their offense better, even if their quarterback was still Bo Nix. And then I think the most reasonable trade from this entire mix, I'm also kind of personally just only a tiny bit disappointed because I saw all of this before I saw it texted about in our group chat. And so now I feel like I was thinking, oh, you know what? I haven't seen it. I almost texted the group chat about this. And then I saw that I think Kent had said something about it already. Barnwell has the Ravens. It's always the Ravens. Yeah. Barnwell has the Ravens taking Kayvon Thibodeau from the Giants for a 4th round pick. Thibodeau's an undrafted free agent next year, an unrestricted free agent next year, and the Giants have invested very, very heavily in those edge spots. It seems like a pretty telegraphed move for the Giants to make. I think I'd just do that. I think if you told me that maybe we're finagling it here a little more, but all right, you're trading away Trent McDuffie and a 4th, and you're getting 29 overall in Kayvon Thibodeau, it goes down a little bit smoother that way. It doesn't guarantee that he'll be more than a rental. You have to probably let him play that out before you figure out what his worth is going to be in Spags' defense in the long haul. Maybe Spags loves him and feels confident ahead of time. But that's a reasonable cost for a professional NFL defensive end where there's no guarantee it works out. There's no guarantee he's on the team in 2 years.
Right.
But I think it's a reasonable hack, and I think he's a logical fit where I also worth the draft capital over, say, Bradley Chubb on the free agent market. I like the idea of the Chiefs making a move for Thibodeau. What say you?
Yeah, I think the Chiefs need to do whatever they can to bring in guys that can rush the passer. And I'm at the kind of the point now where it's just like, I don't really necessarily care what the name is. I just want guys that I feel comfortable with getting after the passer, because you can't have Chris Jones and friends and the power of friendship to be able to rush the passer. I don't think that that's going to be a logical way for a 32-year-old Chris Jones to be having to shoulder most of the load while George Karlaftis gets 6-second sacks, right? I don't think that is a great opportunity to do that. Mike Dana was supposed to be another guy, and he wasn't. He just didn't end up doing that, and that's okay. You kind of got to take your lumps there, and then you will move on. Whether that's bringing in a Kwity Paye, a Boye Mafe, trading for Kayvon Thibodeau on top of it. I mean, look, I think that there's a real scenario where the Chiefs sign multiple edge rushers, and they probably need to sign multiple edge rushers, because I looked at this on That Football Show. We talked about this a little bit. If you just look at their depth chart right now, Josh, let me read you who their under contract edge rushers are.
It's a short list.
George Karlaftis. Yeah. Mike Dana, who we all assume to be gone, is the other part of that. We all assume Mike Dana will be gone. Ashton Gelati, Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Forgot about that guy. He's
guaranteed
on the roster.
money. He'll be around.
Ethan Downs. He'll be around, yeah. And Tyreek Smith. Those are your defensive ends. Those are your edge rushers. That's bleak.
Not including Mike Dana, removing him because we don't think he'll be around this cap hit. Is it fair to say you have one starter and one contributor? I don't want to be unfair to Ashton Gelati. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a starter, and he's going into year 2. I mean, you have one starting defensive end. You might have your... This is a larger George Karlaftis conversation. You might have your 2 and your 4. Yeah. That's kind of the concern, right? Mm-hmm. I guess I will say, in the Boye Mafe thing, where obviously the Chiefs were connected to him at the trade deadline, I kind of dismissed the idea of trading for Kayvon Thibodeau and then instantly extending him. Any free agent you sign, you're doing that. Yeah. Obviously, now the trade for a player, I talked about this back in the Frank Clark trade days. You pay twice when you pay in draft capital and in salary. My feeling with the Thibodeau deal is that a 4th-round pick and a reasonable, like, hey man, we're going to give you 2 kind of guaranteed years of real money, but not the Frank Clark contract. It's different than giving up a first or 2 firsts and then giving someone $30 million a year. So that, I think you just have to be creative about figuring out how to do exactly what you're saying there, Tucker. To bulk that room out, adding multiple guys. If you can spend that 4th-round pick to get Kayvon Thibodeau, you also are now not bidding against the rest of the NFL. You're just like, hey man, you're here this year, and you can play this year out, and it would be a hard time for him to sign an extension because he had 2.5 sacks in 10 games last year.
Correct.
9 quarterback hits. Again, I don't have the comments open right now, but I know it always happens when you talk about a player coming off a bad year. When you talk about acquiring a player coming off a down year, it's always like, yeah, but he stinks now. He was not as productive last year as you would like him to be. We're talking about the 5th overall pick a handful of years ago. You are buying low now, and you're not always going to hit. Sometimes sometimes you're going to buy low. You're going to buy medium on Kadarius Toney, and he's never going to exceed what you gave him. Maybe he's good enough. He has a Super Bowl moment. No one's bleeding out on that 3rd-round pick. That's fine. But you have to take a couple of chances somewhere because the chances you've taken at defensive end so far haven't worked. Not enough of them have worked, I should say. FAU didn't work out. If FAU was a starter, this entire offseason is different. If FAU establishes himself last year as a rotational player, and you say, hey, we got Karlaftis, Gelati, and FAU. We've got 3 of our 4. You really want like 4 guys in a real rotation. That's 3 of our 4. We'll take Ruben Bain at 9, or we'll sign Boye Mafe. We'll figure it out there. That's just not the world that they get to occupy right now. It's simply too thin, and as you mentioned earlier, it's thin at a lot of places. Like when you say multi-year rebuild, I tend to agree with you in terms of like overall roster health. The fun cheat that the Chiefs get to have is that when you have Patrick Mahomes, you don't need a 100% roster. You need an 80% roster, and then Patrick Mahomes can make up the difference. No offense to Super Bowl champion Sam Darnold, the Seahawks have a 110% roster. Their roster is so good that they could get there without getting plus performances from their quarterback. Good enough, and some plus performances mixed in there. But can you get this roster to a place where Patrick Mahomes can be a Super Bowl contender with that unit again? And I think that you can do that in a year, but you're probably 2 years away from having a healthy roster, which right now you can't say they have. They have too many holes at too many places.
They can't fix everything this offseason. I think that's an important mindset to have going into, because we're so used to now, like, oh, the Chiefs have holes, and when we go into the season, we're talking about for training camp who's wide receiver 6. Like, that's the biggest storyline that we have 95% of the time in the Patrick Mahomes era. That's not going to be the case this year, because they have right now 3 guys as defensive tackles under contract when you normally have like 6. They have 3 guys. Jerry Tillery's gone, Derek Notty's gone, Mike Pennell's gone. I guess I shouldn't put the horse for the carriage, put the carriage for the horse there.
They're not under contract next year as of right now.
Yeah, and Omar Norman-Lott's coming off of a knee injury, right? He's coming off a torn ACL. So you're looking at your 2 defensive tackles, your starting defensive tackles as of now are 32-year-old Chris Jones and Omar Norman-Lott coming off of a knee injury after he added 70 pounds to his frame. That's good. That's great. And then you look at your defensive end room, as we kind of talked about. George Karlaftis, we can say he's a rotational. He's your starter, right? But you talk about the 4. They probably have 1.5 right now. When you talk about Ashton Gelati, I want to be fair to Ashton Gelati. Like, he played a lot of time. But, man, I mean, Ethan Downs isn't moving a needle. FAU's not moving a needle. Charles Minihue was wildly disappointing, and he's a free agent, so I don't even know if Charles Minihue plays football next year, truthfully. I mean, I don't know if there's another team that'll see what Charles Minihue did last year and said, yeah, we want to sign that guy. I think the only team, I think his saving grace would be the Chiefs being like, hey, you want to come back for a 1-year vet min? I don't think Charles Minihue does that. And would I be okay with Charles Minihue 1-year vet min?
I'd take something like that, absolutely, because you can still let him kick inside and give you a little bit of spark. 15 interior snaps a year. Not that he would only play 15, but like, hey, make something happen here. Mike Dana's probably going to be an NFL player for several more years because I think he can be useful at a lower number than what the Chiefs have been paying him.
Yes.
The defensive line group, here's another way to look at the defensive tackle spot. The names you just mentioned there. Wait, so who was there a third? Is Zach Pickens?
Zach Pickens, Zach Pickens is under contract technically.
He didn't play a regular season snap last year, right?
Did he get in at the in week 18?
Oh, he did. No, he did. You're right. I'm sorry, he did. He didn't pop up here when I was looking in Football Reference. Okay, so Zach Pickens played 59 defensive snaps. I'm gonna say he is. He started the year as a practice squatter. Maybe he's there again to start next year.
Yeah.
Here's what you have on that defensive tackle. You have future Hall of Famer Chris Jones and 73 snaps from Omar Norman-Lott. And if you want to throw in 59 from Zach Pickens, you're welcome to, but I'm going to click on and see now. I don't think any of those snaps came when the Chiefs were in playoff contention.
Oh, God.
All due respect.
No.
I like the Zach Pickens and Broderick Martin, right? I like the idea. We talked about them on the inaugural episode of this podcast. And
big
not much after
podcast. You know, we're a big D-tackle podcast.
We were born in the trenches. It's an important position. Do you think, side note here, has Pro Football Reference been making you do the check that I'm not a robot thing?
Yeah. When
you open it? You think they've been getting scraped by AI absolute nonsense?
Ooh, I bet they are.
That has to. My guess is that they've put that up because they can't handle the traffic of a million bots stealing all of their information, so they can put it into a search engine that doesn't work. Which has been my experience with every one of those tools, where I go, "How many snaps did I not play?" And then it's like 4,000. Like that's not right. I'll go look at it myself. I can't. One of those places tried a football specific one, and it wasn't ready for prime time, which seems to be a common theme. Anyway. I digress. Now it's also, thank you, I'm assuming that's what's happening. Thank you, whoever's fault that is, because Pro Football Reference is really hard to use right now. It took that entire conversation, that entire monologue, was how much time it took for me clicking Zach Pickens' name to it going through to the homepage of Zacchaeus L. Pickens, which is a killer name. I didn't know that his full name was Zacchaeus.
He's not a wee little man either, though, I'll tell you that.
He sure isn't. 6'4", 303. Well, you know what? He played he played game 15, 16, 17.
Yeah.
So
I thought that he was inactive when they were just like, hey, you know what, Derek Nottie and Mike Pennell, how about you guys just take it easy, man? And they did. They were doing it. They were taking it easy before, but they took it even more easy.
It sucks so much that both of them are in like kind of just windmill dunk territory. As two players, Derek Nottie was by a mile the best draft pick of Brett Veach's inaugural draft class, and Mike Pennell should have been just like a veteran legend for all of his time with this. And hopefully when time heals, like Dan Sorensen, you remember the good times more than the bad now, hopefully. And it wasn't as spotlighted for, fair enough. It wasn't spotlighted for Derek Nottie or Mike Pennell. They didn't get put one-on-one with a receiver they could never cover, right? So, I hope that doesn't stick to them too much. But they just were both absolutely delightful during their time in Kansas City. And it seems like you would assume that time is ending where their last memory, our last memory of them with the team, is them being forced to play way more snaps than any other team in the NFL wanted to let them play.
Yeah.
Wild.
It is. I'm looking at this defense right now. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that they are devoid of talent on the defensive side of the ball.
This show has been mostly about trading Trent McDuffie away.
Right. And that is what concerns me the most is you're staring down the barrel of losing Leo Chanel. Jack Cochran's a free agent. Dave Toub won't let that happen. So is Cole Christensen, actually. Drew Tranquil's probably gone with cap casualties. You're looking at right now a linebacker room of Nick Bolton.
All you need.
Jeffrey Bossa.
Good enough for me. You can stop reading after one. Sorry, go ahead.
Cooper
Nick
McDonald.
Bolton,
That's Craig's guy.
Craig Mack.
McDonald.
Yeah.
Brandon George.
Yeah, he had a couple plays in the preseason. Man, my brain is sick. I remember those.
Yeah. So those are actually all of the linebackers that you have under contract, not including Drew Tranquil, who we all assume will be cut, right? Cool. Just as a cap casualty. Can they bring Leo back? Sure. Should they? Probably. Because you're looking at it now. We talked about this on that football show. The safety room, if you look at our lads right now, which is a very good depth chart site that I like to look at for a lot of this stuff. Our lads is very on top of a lot of this stuff for all the teams across the league. All of their free safeties, I'll say that in air quotes, right? All their free safeties are in green, which means that they're free agents. So Brian Cook, Mike Edwards, and Deion Bush, which, Deion Bush is... Those are your 2 and 3 at free safety, whereas Mike Edwards and Deion Bush, career special teamer Deion Bush, who I think got hurt in preseason,
I think he did. He picked off Lamar Jackson in the end zone, the AFC Championship game in Baltimore, right?
Look, I love what Deion. Yeah, yes, he did. I mean, I love Deion Bush, and especially special teams wise, he was a great contributor there. Yeah. And he had a pretty nasty injury, if I remember correctly. It was either preseason or early on in the season. He had a pretty nasty injury. Right. But Mike Edwards doesn't have any knees left, man. I mean, we watched him for the last half of the season, but your safety room right now, Shamari Connor, Jaden Hicks, Chris Roland Wallace, if you want to throw him there.
I like all three of those players in specific roles, but I don't know if Spags does.
It makes me, the more I look at it, the more it makes me a little sick to my stomach. When I look at this defense, there's just no, with all due respect, there's just no talent.
You know something kind of wild that I realized this morning? We can wrap up on this. For the 100th consecutive show, I'm not going to give my hottest movie take of all time. That feels like a Friday take. We'll see. We got news today, man. I'm not
Yeah, we had a lot to talk about. We had a lot to get to.
You know what's crazy? That 2022 draft, widely praised and rightfully so. Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, Sky Moore, Brian Cook, Leo Chanel, Josh Williams, Darian Kennard, Jalen Watson, Isaiah Pacheco, Najee Johnson. Sky Moore was an objectively bad pick. Didn't work out. Darian Kennard didn't work out here. He seems like a 5th-round player elsewhere. Like, he's stuck around, right? And, like, Isaiah Pacheco ending on a bad note. Najee Johnson kind of got dumped on. Excellent 7th-round picks. To say nothing of Jalen Watson in the 7th round. Unbelievable. Josh Williams fell out of favor. Played some good football.
He did.
Brian Cook, Leo Chanel, totally worthy of their draft slots. Obviously, McDuffie, Karlaftis. What's crazy is that there is a legitimate chance that the Chiefs only have 1 second contract out of that draft class. I don't think it's likely. I think they're probably going to extend Cook, Chanel, or Watson. I think one of those 3 is pretty likely, and that's if they trade McDuffie, right? And that's not a sneaky take of like, actually it was a bad draft class. But if you think about the ways that that hitting on those players benefits you for the next 4 years or the next 10 years, they're paying George Karlaftis to say, hey, like, you're a 10-year player here. We're going to keep you at value because we paid you early. It's just kind of fascinating that they did pretty much everything right, except at wide receiver, obviously. They did pretty much everything right in that draft class, and we are near the end of the payoff of it. Just as a reminder of how quickly those rookie contracts burn.
I think it's interesting to know there's a lot of external factors that go into that as well. I think if they would have hit a little bit more on their free agency signings, that would be a little bit more likely that they could re-sign some of these guys. Or the second contracts that they signed other guys to wouldn't have been so much Nick Bolton, that they could sign other players, you know? Or, like, you look at the wide receiver room that they had. They tried the Hollywood Brown thing. Didn't work. You know, like, they've tried to take swings. Jerry Tillery. Didn't work. Like, they tried to bring in guys. Christian Fulton, as of now, hasn't really worked. Right. They tried their offseason last year, man. I might need to be some think pieces done on that offseason last year.
We should we should do a little breakdown on that at some point. So you're right. Like, obviously they're picking ninth. They won 6 games. So now, with the benefit of hindsight, like you mentioned, like Tershawn Wharton at the end of his year in Carolina. Like, you don't wish you would have given Tershawn Wharton that deal right now. You just wish you also wouldn't have given that money to Christian Fulton.
It's the thing, too, like, I brought up, started mid-season, I was like, hey, they spent a lot of money this offseason, and none of those guys are, like, playing right now. Like, midway through the season, it was, like, Jalen Moore. That was before, all the Josh Simmons stuff had happened. And you do the Jalen Moore deal, I think, 10 times out of 10 going into it, right? So I don't think there's any flaw there.
9 times out of 9, at least.
Yeah, 9 times out of 9, for sure, yeah. And then you look at the Christian Fulton deal. Like, we all really loved that one. That one didn't really work out. Like, he would just simply wasn't playing. And you had all of this money on the bench. Elijah Mitchell was another guy that days 1 and 2 of free agency. Those are the 3 guys that they signed, Josh, and they could not find the field for the first 8 weeks of the season.
I mean until their left tackle was absent. I mean,
yes,
that's not an exaggeration at all.
Yeah. So that's the thing. You look at that, and then was Nick Bolton's contract last year, or was it the year before?
Yeah, it was last year because he just finished. It's basically a 2-year deal. This is it's crazy.
That seems like it was ages ago. But you look at the decisions that they made. Ultimately, you've got to take some risks, right, when it comes to like off-season roster building and stuff like that. And the risks that they took last off-season, I don't think any of them worked out. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that nothing worked for them last year in their offseason, what they did. And maybe I'll do a video where it's more of like a video essay type thing to look at that. I think I'm going to start shifting my focus since we're coming up on draft content, to do a little bit more Brett Veach draft history, a little bit more of a deep dive into there. And then as we get closer, I will finally do the trade history video. Who knows, though, if that'll actually.
You might be able to do that for Brett Veach's retirement someday. It feels like we've been talking about this trade history video for a very long time. Yeah. It's interesting, man. It's way too early to make the call. And again, like, there are a couple comments about it. So we talk about roster construction. Here's what I'll kind of leave you on. I think we should be talking about roster construction because good or bad, it's how you win championships or not. Like it's step one. Coaching is step two. Performance from the players is step three. Like it's obviously it's all of those things coming together, but you could give the greatest coaches of all time an AFL or which is the offseason league? USFL?
UFL now. It's
UFL
United Football League. Yep.
It's because they've united all the other leagues.
XFL and USFL. Yep. Mm-hmm.
If you gave Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo and Dave Tobe the St. Louis Battlehawks, I do not think that they are winning the AFC West, which I know pretty confidently because they had the Kansas City Chiefs last year and didn't win the AFC West. Right. So fair enough. But like, it is worth seeing where the roster seems uncharacteristically thin, and that's where you look at the missteps at defensive end and wide receiver and running back. And then some of it's just churn, which again, the 2022 draft class and like the linebacker room and all that, but it's I know some people get sick of it, I know some people love it. So whichever camp you're in, thanks for being here. It's why we spent all that breath talking about Nick Bolton's salary last year, because $4 million extra that you give to Nick Bolton is $4 million you can't give to the number one or number two free agent running back that you like. So instead you end up with just a couple of dudes in the stable again. It is why I think football is so fascinating from that perspective. More than the X's and O's and more than just on Sundays, I think football is fascinating 365 days out of the year. NFL football, to be clear. Because I think that stuff, the draft and free agency and the salary cap, I think is fascinating. And you've got to be exceptional at all of that to have a true dynasty. The Chiefs have had stretches of it. They've had stretches where it hasn't been so great. And we're going to have, we've got a lot of time before the draft. We have very little time before the combine and the rumor mill really gets going. And then we're less than a month away from the start of the league year.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I'll be in a car when you're doing this show, and I think with Nick Springer. So
great.
That could be interesting. No, on Monday. It's next Monday.
Monday, week from today. Okay, got it.
That might be a solo Josh Especial. But look, combine right around the corner. Verno and I have a 9 p.m. reservation at St. Elmo's Steakhouse on Monday night, and we are going to get after it, and we're gonna find all those nice little nuggets for you, man. We're gonna be eating those nugs. We need a little bit of a. I need some segment. What is it called? What are they called in radio? Imaging? Is that what it is? Or
some imaging? Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to put in the request here. So you saying you and Nick, you think will be in the car together this time a week from now?
Yeah, I do.
Can I want to put in one, if this is too difficult to pull off, so be it. I would love to put in a request for just a 1 or 2 minute back of the car, just like a vlog entry of just you and Nick specifically to air on this show, where I'll just throw to it like I do with the breaks or whatever. I can just, if you can upload it, or you can email it to me and then I'll upload it if I can figure out how StreamYard works. I would love to just say, all right, now for today's first break, I haven't seen this. We're just going to hear from Tucker Franklin and Nick Springer. They're together on the road in Indianapolis. What's going on? And then that's your guys' contribution. I feel like that would lift our spirits. It would certainly lift mine. In your guys' absence. So something to think about depending on where you're at by 11 a.m. or so on Monday.
There's going to be a Tucker Does video coming from Indianapolis as well. So you guys
cannot wait.
Another Tucker Does video. Excited for that one. And let me think. We'll be coming back on Friday. So that video, I guess I could do it on Saturday. I could do Saturday or maybe even Monday. What did I do last time? The Super Bowl I did Monday, right? So...
Yes, because it was after the show came out. After we did this show on Monday, then it came out at like 2.
Yeah, so. I think technically there's like still workouts for the combine on Monday, which like I think it's like kickers. So like, is there really workouts going on?
Seems like maybe some very important workouts. You gotta be out there scouting kickers and punters, dude.
Well, I'm not gonna be there. It's also a lot easier to watch the workouts on TV than it is in person.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sure.
Yeah, so much easier. But yeah,
take your binoculars. I can't wait. Ooh. Someday I'm going to make the trip for a combine. This year will not be the year that I do that, but very excited for you to see you with some binoculars trying to figure out if Jeremiah Love is good or not. There's going to be some excellent content across KCSN when the Combine comes around. And I think tonight's going to be a good night to listen to the KC Laboratory. If you want to hang out. In fact, Tucker, have you talked about the one moving part of tonight's lab publicly, or should we just leave that a surprise, and if it happens live? There might be you don't...
That's not for the lab. That's for the draft show.
Oh, it's for that's a standalone for the draft show. Oh, fantastic. Well, just check out the lab tonight, because I know they're going to talk about Tyreek Hill and all of their thoughts. I'm curious to hear what the guys have to say about that. We're going to have a full week for Only Weird Games, and of course, we'll be back with another edition of Everything Else again on Friday. So for the glowing Tucker D. Franklin, I am Joshua Brisco. We'll talk to you again on Friday. Till then, bye, Mom! Some of those birds chirping, man. That's a big old woodpecker out here. Let's go.
Yeah. I was on a walk the other day, and
actually might have been a squirrel, by the way. That was a squirrel kind of crying. You were on a walk, you said? Sorry, please.
Yeah, I was on a walk, and I pulled out the old, the app on your phone from, oh gosh, what high-end Ivy League school is it that does this app?
Cornell.
Yes, it is Cornell. And you can just
Merlin Bird app.
Yes, phenomenal
Love this
app.
thing.
I was just walking around, just having that thing up and recording and be like, oh yeah, that's a house sparrow. That's a cardinal.
Driving home from our Valentine's lunch, I think, Renee and I saw a bald eagle flying around.
Oh!
I saw one flying over our backyard a few weeks ago. I saw another one this weekend.
They also don't make the noise that people think they make, because in the movies, when you see a bald eagle, they actually put a hawk sound, like a hawk noise.
Yeah?
Because they screech, because the hawk screech is a lot cooler than what the noise bald eagles actually make are.
What noise does a bald eagle actually make?
I can't really do it.
I was really hoping you'd try.
No.
I don't know. That's a great tidbit, though. Because you're right. I mean, like the hawk, is what you get with the eagles, but that's hawk.
But here's another interesting tidbit. Lance Verderam, father of Matt Verderam, huge in the birdwatching community.
That's awesome. I need to talk to him about
celebrity
that.
birdwatcher.
Really?
Oh, like big level birdwatcher.
Yeah, my backyard's just like a little bird oasis right now. Birds and squirrels are having a great time out here. But I need
Lance
to
would
get
be thrilled.
Papa Verderam back here. Put up a couple of lawn chairs and say some F words.